Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Russell Gerber and with you for the Africam show here, brought to you by explore.org, and we'll be hanging out together for the next half an hour or so, checking out what we got on the live cameras and of course going through some of our great highlights from the last week on the cameras, things we've caught that you might not have seen over the last few days. And we've really had some super cool things while we watch all these beautiful ellies having a drink and hanging out around the waterhole at Tau. That's where we are now. But as always, folks, please feel free to pop us a question and comment in the question window on the YouTube channel. So just shoot them across to me, anything that you might have on your mind, and it's always a great pleasure to interact with you. So if you have anything that you want to know, let me know. It's so nice to see some people out on safari. You can see them out in the background there, hanging out by the waterhole. And this elephant completely covered in mud, having a great Tuesday afternoon spa, mud treatment. And as I said, we've got a lot of cool highlights lined up for us as well today. As one of my colleagues said, it's been a pretty rough week for impala. And speaking of impala, let's go over to Rosie's and check out some of easily Southern Africa's most commonly seen antelope species. And as I was saying, the impala did not fare so well on the cameras this week when it comes to predators, and we'll be going through some videos showcasing that. So be ready for a little bit of African wild. Things that happen in the bush that have to happen to keep the animals going. But as I mentioned on last week's show, you know, this time of year where things are so dry, it's difficult times for the herbivores. There's not much left to eat. You can see not much grass around the waterholes. Even the trees and shrubs have very few or very little leaves available. You'll often see the herbivores losing some condition, and all of that plays into the hands of the predators. It helps them to, or gives them a slightly better edge in catching these very fast and fit animals that in the summertime can be very difficult to catch. But a big part of it all, of course, is that there's less and less water available in the reserve, so the herbivores are forced to come down to certain locations to get a drink of water, as we can see here with this young impala. And it gives the predators just that little edge this time of year. It's always a cycle. Denise Arnold says this is amazing. Teresa Cunningham, fantastic. Thank you, both of you. So glad you could join us. As I said, we're here every Tuesday around about this time. We're always live, checking out what might come on down with a couple of those highlights, like I said. But nice to see some of the impala alive and kicking. Others we'll see later today were not so fortunate over the last week. But such beautiful little animals, as I said, very commonly seen in Southern Africa, in pretty much all of our wild regions and protected areas. We don't see them too much outside of the reserves like many of the wild animals here in Africa. It looks like they've abandoned us for now. And on that note, I guess there's no time like the present to give you a little quiz question for the week. So, as always, the question comes in the beginning of the show and we'll give you the answer towards the end. And everyone was so sharp and on the ball last week, so this week we're going to be a little bit more tough on you. And today's question is, who is the closest living relative to the hippo? Who is the closest living relative to the hippo? So send in your answers during the show and I'll give you all the answer towards the end of the show today. And while there's no one around here at Rosie's, I think it's time for us to dive into our first video, which is really so special. I didn't manage to catch it on the live cameras myself, but watched it all in its entirety. But so special, and to see what is one of Africa's rarest predators. And this is, of course, the African wild dog, or painted wolf, depending on who you ask. And this pack of dogs managed to chase down a male impala. And this, of course, was a tau. So just around the waterhole, a tau. In the background, you can see those little eyes coming through. Those are some jackals. Everyone coming to check out what's been captured here. And, of course, so important for the dogs to take advantage of this time of year. And what happened here, they managed to catch that male and chased this female into the water. And unfortunately for the poor female, she happened to get trapped in the mud and couldn't make her way out. But the dogs, as I said, took down this male and weren't too frantic in the eating process of the male itself. And for any of you who've seen wild dogs actually hunting, they will often devour whatever they take down very, very quickly. And in this case, they weren't in too much of a hurry, which suggests that they may have had another kill fairly recently, that they weren't too hungry to actually finish off that male too quickly. And for the female, that female didn't make it, unfortunately. She eventually succumbed to exhaustion, and there was a crocodile near to her for a while, but nothing seemed to happen to her. Eventually she was taken by the scavengers, the jackals and vultures that came down, and we're back live at Tau now, of course, with our elephants in the water. But just to paint the whole picture for you, we'll dive straight into our next highlight from that same scene. This was just a little later on, once the dogs had left the kill, where we had the arrival of the various scavengers and the different hierarchy of scavengers. And here you can see some pied crows, those black and white crows, and of course the vultures. These are white-backed vultures, taking advantage of the kill left over by the dogs. You can see the male horns still there. And coming in on the scene, those black-backed jackals that we saw, just the eyes in the background in our first highlight. You can see arriving on the scene now with quite a lot of meat left in both of those kills. And then a little later on in the day, the arrival of one of the bigger scavengers in the area, but also very rarely seen, part of the hyena family. This is, of course, the much rarer cousin to the spotted hyena. This is the brown hyena. And not every day you get to see one of Africa's most secretive predators and scavengers so nicely and out in the open like this. And as you can see, was trying to get a takeaway to take on back to perhaps to their den. It would be difficult to say, but yeah, to try and get as much of that kill away from the area as possible. As I say, not every day you get to see brown hyena so wonderfully like this, out in the open. And a nice long sight, and you can see all of their hair standing up. It's a much more shaggy cousin to the spotted hyena, like I said, but still much more powerful than the jackals, but nowhere near as tough as their spotted cousins. And you can see now heading off into the distance with that leftover bit of kill, and managed to get a takeaway for home. So that was what unfolded at Tau in the last few days. A really incredible series of events. Like I said, two of Africa's rarest predators to see in one location like that. And it's one of the many moments of magic that we capture on the cameras from time to time. As I said, this time of year we're so much more likely to see these kinds of predator-prey interactions, as things are really dry, as I was mentioning at the beginning of the show. So Vicky O'Neill said, I know it's the cycle, but it doesn't mean I have to watch it. Well, Vicky, I agree with you. It's not easy to watch. I hope you managed to turn your eyes away for that brief moment. But as you can see, still many impalas around, and they're likely to continue to dominate the landscape at Tau and across various regions for our cameras. But it's not easy to watch, and that, as you say, the cycle of life is very much not easy to watch a lot of the time. So thanks for staying with us, though. We're back live now, of course. This is at Tembe. We're hanging out with this big bull elephant and a bunch of pregnant female impalas in the background. Many of them will be pregnant now, if not most of them, and looking to drop their young babies in around about November, generally. But lovely scenes here at Tembe. As I said, for us on the cameras, just a real time of plenty. With all the animals hanging around the water holes. Sometimes we don't see the elephants for a while over the summer season. They tend to move into other parts of the reserve. So cool to see them all hanging out at the water holes now, across all the cameras, especially in the late afternoon like this. It's around about 4:15 in the afternoon in South Africa. I'm sure at different times all over the world from those of you who are joining us in different locations. So just to give you an idea of where we are and where we're coming to you from. Denise Hermandana asks an interesting question about conservation and how do we ensure, or how do the conservation efforts ensure survival of the animals with the burgeoning need of people for arable land and water? Denise, a great question, and easily a debate we could go into over many episodes. And in truth, it is always an ongoing issue in conservation around the world, whether it be the dedication of land to wildlife preserves or for arable land farming, cattle farming, etc. It's an ongoing challenge. And I have to admit, certainly in the field that I've been in as a safari guide for many years, the tourism industry, conservation or ecotourism, has played a huge role in keeping these areas protected. I think, unfortunately, without the added value of being able to bring tourists into these regions, many of the areas would be lost without tourism. And so the ongoing, interest from folks like yourself watching from all over the world and enjoying these wild shots with us, all helps to spread awareness and hopefully, potentially, the opportunity for you to come and visit one day and see these animals for yourself. And in many cases, that tourism has provided the protection needed for these conserved areas. So long may it continue. Obviously, it's been a difficult time in the last couple of years, but we're starting to see more and more people arriving and going out on safari. So I think conservation and ecotourism, of course, done correctly, will play a key role in keeping them protected over the years. But I think it's time for our next highlight. As I said, it wasn't a great week for the impalas. So, Julie, I know you weren't too happy last time. Or Vicky, I'm sorry, Vicky O'Neill. We're going to cross over to a highlight of one of my favorite animals, many of you will know. And this was caught on our Nomad camera that we actually can move around the reserve and often get onto some of our great sightings. And this was a very special one. It's one of our leopards that we do know and see on the cameras quite often. This is the 1-1 leopard, named for the spot pattern above their whiskers. You guys will remember we spoke about that a couple of weeks ago. And we see him at the various locations around Baluli, often along the game path at Willifants River. What was so special about this sighting is that this was, as I said, him around a kill that he'd made. He'd actually killed an impala and hoisted it into the tree that he's looking at now. As he goes up, just look carefully and you'll see where he's actually stashed that kill. There he goes. So amazing to watch him climb a tree with no branches, easy as that. And there you can see a female impala. He's obviously fed off of it a little bit already. You can see some of the meat missing around the hind quarters. And it looks like he's just trying to get it wedged in a little bit better so that it doesn't fall out of the tree. And the reason for this, obviously, is to keep it away from other potential predators, things like hyena, spotted hyena, lion, jackals. And this way you'll be able to keep it away. And you can see here also pulling out the hair with his incisors. So, like I said, a tough week for them. We've gone back live now with some live action with crocodiles in the midst of a bit of mating, which is very common to see this time of year. But really cool to capture on camera. Not every day you get to see it all happening before your eyes. And we've got a beautiful night heron in the foreground on the right hand side. It's a fairly slow process, the mating of crocodiles, as you can see. And as I mentioned, not every day you get to see this happening live. So it's likely to be the female underneath with the male on top. Denise Danner says cheetahs are my favorite, but I love leopards too. Yeah, Denise, I also like the cheetah, I must admit, but I've always been prone to the leopards. I think it's because it took me so long as a child. We used to go on safari every year. It took us years to finally see a leopard in the wild. I just think they are such exceptionally beautiful animals. And I'm just having a look here. Suzanne asks, what's the best time to come for a safari? Susan, this is very often considered the best time of year in winter, as things are a little cooler than in the summertime. Also with the nature of safari, where you head out early in the morning and late afternoon, and with the lack of water available, the game viewing and those predator-prey interactions, like I mentioned, are very, very good this time of year in many locations. So that also adds to the popularity of safari. So for most people, the winter season heading into spring, often considered the best time to come out safari for game viewing purposes. Obviously, as you go into summer, there's different reasons. Game viewing may not be quite as good, but you get excellent bird viewing with all of our summer migrants arriving. So it's a difficult question. But yeah, most people tend to come out on safari in the winter if they can. So let's go into our next highlight. This was an interesting one for me, not something again you see every day, and that's why we popped it in the highlights. This was a continuation of that wonderful sighting on the Nomad Cam, where we saw that leopard up in the tree with that stashed impala kill. And here you can see these warthogs actually eating some of the intestines, which looked like they still had some undigested grass and vegetation in. And again, though warthogs are known to be omnivorous from time to time, it's very seldom that you'll actually see them eating any kind of meat. And again, it all comes down to this time of year where things are so dry, things are so difficult for the herbivores. Warthogs in particular get hit pretty hard, especially when there's no grazing available. And it may be the reason that we're seeing them actually eating the intestines that dropped from the tree above, left by that leopard kill, as I mentioned. But a really cool sighting. I know a little gruesome for some of you, but really interesting to see an animal that is almost solely a herbivore. As I said, considered to be omnivorous, but you don't often actually see it in practice. So really cool sighting for me. I haven't seen them do that in a very long time. Once again, having the cameras out in the wild and not disturbing any of the animals, such a huge bonus. But a great story that unfolded there on the Nomad Cam with that leopard kill. And we're back live now. This is at Nkoro, where we've got the beautiful saddle-billed stork. You can see that yellow part at the base of the bill on the top that looks similar to a horse saddle. That's how it gets its name. One of the most beautiful stork species, and not one we see that often down here. Botswana. We see them much more commonly in Mozambique as well. But really nice to see the saddle-billed storks around again. As I said, with the drier time of year, you get all of these predatory species hanging around the waterholes. Of course, now with things drying up, all the different fish, amphibians and other aquatic species all running out of places to hide. Looks like he's got his eye on something right now. No, no, false alarm. Alright, we got one more highlight I wanted to show you before we run out of time. And it leads us into the answer for our quiz question. And that quiz question was, what is the closest living relative to the hippo? You can see a lovely shot we got over the weekend of this hippo right near the camera. You can see those incredible tusks on the inside of its mouth there. Those modified canines. Checking out the camera. Maybe trying to get a new Facebook profile pic. You can see those lovely whiskers all along the front of its mouth. And then also, if you look carefully, you can see a bunch of scratches down the side of the body. This looks like a male. And they will often fight for territory. Again, a tough time for the hippos as things start to dry up. And they'll fight sometimes extremely aggressively to maintain a territory or to gain a new territory, especially when things are getting smaller and smaller by the day. But just a lovely clip that I wanted to show you. And for those of you who weren't sure, well, let's see who got the answer right. So we've got, and I hope none of you cheated and looked it all up on Google, but I'll have to trust you on this one. Nancy Mountain Hopkins says elephant, Frank Patience, horse, Vicky O'Neill, rhino, Terry, Andy, Lisa, Debbie, you all got it right. And the answer is whales. The cetaceans are actually the closest living relatives to the hippo at the moment. It was actually thought for a long time that pigs were actually their closest living relatives. But recent DNA evidence actually indicates that the hippos are more closely related to cetaceans. And they share a common ancestor with the whales as recently as 55 million years ago, which is pretty recent if you look at the evolutionary timeline. But well done to all of you who got the answer right. I hope it was all done honestly. Well, our crocodiles are still entwined with one another and busy and perhaps looking for some privacy, so we'll take the camera away from them for a moment. But not for too long. But folks, unfortunately, we're out of time for today. It's been my pleasure hanging out with you as always, and thank you for your interaction and questions. It's always so great to chat to you all. Sorry if we didn't get around to some of your questions. We do our best to get to as many as we can. You can hear those whistling ducks, white-faced whistling ducks in the background. And with the whistling ducks, I'm going to bid you all farewell. I hope you all have a wonderful week. My name is Russell Gerber, as I mentioned. I'll be back with you all again next week for the Africam show. But don't forget to join us for the Africam for Good show on Thursday, around about the same time. We will discuss various conservation topics every week. So join us then. Otherwise, I'll see you all again for the live show next week, Tuesday, same time and same place. Keep well. Cheers for now.